This is Today As It Happened. Good Monday evening. I'm Holly Furfer, guiding you through our timeline of the day's most important news. From the continuing fallout from the DOJ's release of the Epstein files to the U.S. Coast Guard's pursuit of another sanctioned oil tanker in the Caribbean. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. Heavy rain and dangerous flooding killed one person in Redding, California, as atmospheric rivers continue to pound the West Coast. More than 30 million people are under flood watches across California. Cities in Northern California saw roadways flooded and vehicles stranded on Sunday. Some areas could get up to 6 inches of rain. On Christmas Eve, another storm will target Southern California, with concerns for flash flooding and mudslides, especially in wildfire-burn areas. From the NFL, Steelers receiver DK Metcalf could face discipline after swiping at a fan during Pittsburgh's win over Detroit on Sunday. Video shows Metcalf and a fan in the front row talking before the two-time Pro Bowler threw a right hand towards the man's face. Metcalf appeared to make little or no contact. No penalty was called on the field, but the NFL will review the incident. By the way, the Steelers won that game 29-24. And the Powerball jackpot has grown to an estimated $1.6 billion after no one matched all 6 winning numbers Saturday night. This makes it the 5th largest U.S. lottery jackpot ever and the 4th largest in Powerball history. The winner can choose a lump sum of $735.3 million, that's a nice amount, or annual payments totaling $1.6 billion. By the way, the odds of winning Monday's drawing are 1 in 292.2 million. Good luck. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is defending the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files release after heavy criticism from lawmakers. A photo showing President Trump on a desk was removed from the files Friday over concerns it contained unredacted faces of victims. Blanche says the photo will go back up after investigation. Congress required DOJ to release all Epstein files by December 19th, but only partial files were released. The department says it needs more time to protect victim identities. The U.S. Coast Guard is pursuing another sanctioned oil tanker in the Caribbean. This is the 3rd vessel targeted in less than 2 weeks as the Trump administration intensifies its crackdown on Venezuela's shadow fleet. The tanker is accused of flying a false flag and evading sanctions to traffic stolen oil. President Trump has announced a blockade of Venezuela and demanded the country return assets that were seized from U.S. oil companies. Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George joins us now live from Capitol Hill to talk about both these topics. And Joe, let's start with the situation in Venezuela. This weekend, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul speaking out, saying the seizures of multiple oil tankers in the Caribbean, and I quote, was a provocation and prelude to war. That's a scary statement. Is there a real worry that he might be right?
Well, I don't know if the word worry is correct, because if you're asking the Trump administration, they're not rolling anything out here. I mean, they're not rolling out land strikes. In fact, the president indicated that land strikes may soon be beginning here. The president isn't rolling out war either. There's a number of Trump administration officials who believe that Maduro is a bad egg and that he's caused great chaos, not just for the people of Venezuela, but also for Central South America for many, many years. To get people caught up to speed as to why this oil blockade, this seizure of oil carriers that are believed to be originating from Venezuela, why this matters. Oil is the economic sector in Venezuela. It isn't it is the economic driver in Venezuela. It's the source of Maduro's money. It's the source of Maduro's power. And if the Trump administration is starting to take that source of revenue out, it could indirectly impact Nicolas Maduro's ability to stay in power. Now, as we have seen with dictators throughout the decades, oftentimes it isn't the dictator who suffers when money is seized, but oftentimes the people in this case being Venezuela. The private sector in Venezuela has collapsed a long time ago. And while illegal drugs has also been targeted by the Trump administration, the drug smuggling boats, after all, that have been hit by the military in recent weeks and months, that sector pales in comparison to the money that's generated by oil in Venezuela, one of the richest reserves on planet Earth when it comes to oil here. And there's already signs that it's going to have a residual impact on other places around the world as well. Venezuelan oil has, for many years, helped prop up Cuba. The Wall Street Journal reporting over the weekend that this blockade could further drive Cuba into an economic catastrophe. Foreign policy analysts have said that oftentimes Venezuela's oil would end up on the black market in China, so there could be impacts throughout Asia as well here. President Trump, again, not ruling out anything on the Venezuelan front. We're going to wait and see what the president has to say a little bit later today. We're expecting him to have an announcement with the Secretary of the Navy, as well as the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. And we haven't been given much detail as to what it involves, but the fact that Navy's part of this announcement, the Secretary of Defense is as well, you would think that at least a Venezuela question may come up if this may be the source of the entire event. Again, we're going to be covering that extensively throughout the day as the world wait and sees what may be next for President Trump and Venezuela. Senator Lindsey Graham talked extensively about this. And remember, Senator Graham, President Trump, they don't always see eye to eye, but they're very close friends. They're oftentimes in lockstep. This is what Senator Graham said about the situation between the U.S. and Venezuela over the weekend.
President Trump promised to secure our nation from the scourge of narco drug trafficking. The kingpin in our backyard is Maduro in Venezuela. They're poisoning America. They're aligned with Hezbollah. Iran vowed to come to their aid just yesterday. So I applaud President Trump of trying to bring down this narco-terrorist state in Venezuela run by Maduro. They're bad news. They did seize our assets in 1976. They are flooding our country with cocaine. They're aligned with international terrorist organizations. I support the idea of standing up to Maduro, and I want him to go.
That rhetoric happening while the U.S. military has amassed the largest amount of military service members in the Caribbean in generations, Holly. And yes, that includes the USS Ford, based out of Norfolk, Virginia, usually. It is the most advanced supercarrier and newest supercarrier in the naval fleet. They've been stationed in the Caribbean now for several weeks. So we'll wait to see what the president, the White House, has to say on this a little bit later today.
All right. And Joe, the other headline has everyone's attention is the Epstein file released from Friday. I have so many questions, but they said they had to release them. The Department of Justice did release them, but it appears that many people are not happy. Explain what's going on.
Well, they're unhappy with, to use the analogy, the digital black Sharpie, the number of redactions, the number of information that wasn't included. Images like this, you can go to justice.gov/Epstein and you'll see plenty of documents that look like that. Now, to be clear, new photographs were released, new information was released, flight logs and the like, but there was this expectation of more. As Congressman Ro Khanna has indicated, he's a Democratic congressman from California, he's indicated that they had some knowledge of some documents that have existed over the years. Remember, people have talked to lawyers, people have talked to victims. There's this sense that of some paperwork that may be out there. Maybe you couldn't tell a reporter or broadcast it live, but you had a sense that there'd be something there. And then when it comes out and it's not there, it raises the red flag even more. Let's talk a little bit about these redactions, though. You see, looks like women's faces to be blacked out there. That's not what lawmakers are frustrated by. Remember, the law allows for redactions of victims, the protection of victims, making sure that child abuse is not depicted in the public spotlight. It also allows for any type of evidence that could impact a pending investigation or prosecution that can be redacted as well. But the concern from lawmakers in Congress is that too much was redacted. The congressmen who were instrumental in passing the Epstein Files Transparency Act, they're now threatening to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. Some have said go even further, maybe even impeach as a result of all of this. I'm not sure where that fight goes. Let's just take the in contempt of Congress accusation. First off, typically, if that would ever happen, it's a serious offense. I mean, you could go to jail for it. But the way Congress usually handles that is they would refer to it to the Department of Justice for prosecution. In this particular case, it's the Department of Justice the lawmakers are accusing of not being even handed here. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche defended what has been released. He acknowledged not everything's out. They believe that it was impossible to have gotten it all out by Friday's deadline, that lawyers were working around the clock, but it still wasn't fast enough. We're expecting more files in the weeks to come here. And the Deputy Attorney General said that all of this is in the name of just protecting victims. Attorney General Pam Bondi took to social media yesterday and is encouraging anyone with new information because of what has come out, please come forward. They're still interested in pursuing investigations wherever the evidence may take them on this front. President Trump barely mentioned in what came out on Friday. There was some drama over a photograph that was in this one right there on the side of your screen right now, that appeared in a larger photograph on Friday. It was taken off the website of the Department of Justice for an extended period of time over the weekend. That raised red flags. It was, though, re-uploaded Sunday night. Now to President Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton. He was prominently featured in Friday's release. New photos of him in a pool. There wasn't context provided here. The Clintons, though, have responded to this, saying that they believe that the former president's being made, quote, a scapegoat by all of this release. The Clintons have long denied any type of wrongdoing, criminality. The whole argument from the Clintons is that, yes, they knew Jeffrey Epstein until they really knew who he was, and then they severed all ties. The Clintons have been trying to avoid a deposition on the House Oversight Committee slated for mid-January. These photos likely raise some questions. The House Oversight Committee wants to have this deposition happening in person. The Clintons have offered to provide a sworn statement, but lawmakers want this in person. And Senator Tim Kaine, the Democratic senator from Virginia, he even acknowledged that these new Clinton photographs should be addressed by President Clinton in some shape or form in the near future. So we've been using the onion analogy this morning, haven't we, Holly? This is a big, old, complicated onion. We've got a few layers peeled back on Friday, but many more layers remain.
Yeah, Joe, I do have to ask, and this is something that a lot of people have asked me about repeatedly. This has been going on for decades. We know that there are many people involved in this. Completely understand protecting the victims, survivors that may have been mentioned, or photos. But so far we know Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, we saw a picture just now, Mick Jagger, but there has to be troves of men's names on that list who at least were associated or mentioned, but we haven't seen any of those names. We know that there's a lot been redacted. Will those names come out, or why are they being redacted? Are they under investigation? A lot of people want to know, why are we not seeing the meat of what's here?
The law is very clear. In fact, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, you can pull it up on your phone right now. It's only a couple pages. You can read it. It says very clear in the text that no one should be withheld just because they're famous or a political or government official. It says very clear that people's names need to get out there, that being famous, that being in government is not an excuse for not being included. So that's where those cries for more transparency are coming from. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was supposed to reveal a lot of this. Now, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche was pressed on this over the weekend. He said on Meet the Press, which is really his most extensive comments to date here, that this is about protecting victims. So remember, the law does allow the protection of victims, but what is the extent of that? And you can see how we could be on the verge of just a multi-year legal battle, can't you, Holly? Perhaps ending with the Supreme Court deciding what is and is not compliant with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. You can see how this gets legal, technical, and lengthy very quickly. Already this has been a lengthy ordeal, and meanwhile the victims have been saying that they just want more out there in the public arena. The Deputy Attorney General is promising that more will be released. He's acknowledging not everything is out. We'll see if that's the case in the weeks and months ahead.
This is Today as It Happened. Stay with us. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. All right, let's return to our briefing of the day's top stories. We have breaking news at this hour. The Trump administration is pausing 5 offshore wind projects on the East Coast, citing national security concerns. Trump's Department of Interior announced today that effective immediately, leases for all large-scale offshore wind projects being constructed in the U.S. will be paused. The department highlighted unclassified reports from the government that have long found that massive turbine blades can create radar interference and obscure legitimate targets and generate false ones. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum says the pause will protect American people and give the Interior Department time to work with the Defense Department on ways to mitigate any security risks. And thousands of families are still without power just days before Christmas after a massive blackout across San Francisco. That blackout started on Saturday after a PG&E electric facility caught fire. Social media posts show mass closures of restaurants and darkened Christmas decorations on Saturday, one of the busiest shopping days of the year. It also caused a traffic nightmare, leaving hundreds of Waymo vehicles stopped at intersections. Leaders in the area say this is something they have never experienced.
This is unacceptable. I've never seen anything like this in the over a decade I've been here in San Francisco. There will have to be further investigation and questions have to be answered to understand what went wrong.
PG&E said it expects all services to be restored by 2 p.m. local time today. The majority of remaining outages are in the Richmond and Golden Gate Park areas. Denmark is demanding, quote, respect from the U.S. after President Trump appointed a special envoy to Greenland. On Sunday, Mr. Trump announced Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry to the position of Denmark's position. Denmark's foreign minister said in a statement that Landry's appointment showed that the White House is still very much interested in the Arctic island, which is rich in natural resources. The country has repeatedly said, however, Greenland is not for sale. Jim Beam is shutting down whiskey production at its main Kentucky distillery for all of 2026. The company says it will use the time to, quote, invest in site enhancements. Kentucky's $9 billion bourbon industry is facing a whiskey surplus and slumping demand. Bourbon production across the state has dropped more than 28% this year. Exports have also taken a hit, with Canadian sales down more than 60%, and it's unclear how many jobs could be affected. Coming up on Today as It Happened.
If they ask the worker to jump, the worker is going to say how high, because if the worker gets laid off, they're going to have to leave the country.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's continue our walkthrough of the day's top headlines. The Trump administration is removing nearly 30 career diplomats from their positions. According to State Department officials, the shakeup is aimed at replacing each ambassador with personnel who are, quote, fully supportive of Trump's America First priorities. All of them had taken up their posts in the Biden administration. Africa is the continent most affected by the removals, with ambassadors from 13 countries being removed. Second is Asia, with changes coming to 6 countries.
After the holidays, stores and malls fill up again as shoppers return what they didn't want. But keep in mind, return policies change during the holiday season, and making that return may not be that simple. Holiday shopping season is about to turn into holiday return season. Cindy King plans to wait for crowds to die down.
No, I don't like to do returns, no.
But don't miss the return windows, especially with electronics and furniture. Earlier this year, Brenda Reynolds told me she was denied a return on her defective couch because she waited too long.
They said we only had 3 days to report a problem. Otherwise, they could not refund or replace the couch.
Douglas Bowman, professor of marketing at Emory University, explains how holiday returns hit retailers' bottom line.
They have to have labor kind of waiting for the stuff to come in. I got to potentially discount the item.
Most retailers offer free in-store returns, but many now charge for return shipping. Take Macy's, for example. Unless you're a Star Rewards member, return shipping is $9.99. Before you buy, in-store or online, the Better Business Bureau's Melanie McGovern says know a retailer's return policy.
Knowing if you're going to get your money back, if there's an even exchange, if there's a restocking fee.
For smooth returns, include gift receipts. It's not too late to request one. Keep items in original packaging. Don't remove tags. And pay attention to return windows which vary by store. Loyalty programs can also help. For example, My Best Buy Plus and My Best Buy Total members get longer return windows. Walmart shopper Scott Egan hopes he doesn't have to return too many things.
You don't want to come back here the day after Christmas.
No, absolutely not.
Hopefully you can avoid the lines too, so you don't waste your time or money. John Mattery, Scripps News Group.
More of today's top stories ahead on Today As It Happened. Stay with us. Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. So let's pick up right where we left off. President Trump expanded his travel ban to 20 more countries. That's sparking chaos for workers at tech firms like Apple and Google. Thousands have been left stranded overseas and cannot get back to the U.S. Scripps News national correspondent Katia Tubman now is live in New York with the latest on this. And Katia, what led to this crackdown?
Well, good morning, Holly, or good afternoon. The big picture here is that the Trump administration has been aiming to tamper down on immigration into the U.S. by multiple means, one being this visa, H-1B1 visas, which is meant to seek out the most highly skilled workers from outside of the country to fill in shortages. And right now, the U.S. is reviewing social media accounts from visa applicants, as well as those who are out of the country seeking renewals during this holiday season. And those are the people who've had to pause their return to the U.S. because their companies have advised them to do so. Right now, this process of reviewing social media accounts is led to what many immigration lawyers and the ones we spoke to this morning saying that processes for applications will probably be extended months, not even probably up into a year. And this is going to cause major shortages in the amount of people who seek out these visas. Now, we spoke to an expert who has been researching and looking into the process of getting a visa. He says this is making clear this is not an immigration visa. This is about people coming into the country to work. But even as that is so, he argued that these visas have been used to get lower paid workers into the country who rely on these companies and don't have much of a say when it comes to pushing back for workers' rights. And here's what he told us about that.
If they ask the worker to jump, the worker is going to say, how high? Because if the worker gets laid off, they're going to have to leave the country. This should not be viewed as this is a conservative or Republican or anti-immigrant issue. This is an issue around labor policy. And those on the left, Democrats, also are concerned about how it harms both the H-1B workers. It's bad for those foreign workers. They'd much rather be immigrants. And it also harms then the U.S. workers that they're competing with.
Now, supporters of the H-1B1 visa say that there has been a pitted competition between U.S. workers and foreign-born workers who come into the country on this visa to work temporarily. Right now, we know that Google, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon, some of the companies that top the list of employing people with H-1B visas, are cautioning their staffers to stay put, to not leave the country if they can help it, and for those who are already abroad, to stay where they are as the continuation administration moves forward with figuring out what are the next steps legally. We should also note that the step to review social media accounts is topping what already has been put in place to limit the amount of people who can come into the country on these visas. As of September, the Trump administration added a $100,000 fee for anyone applying newly to this program. So a lot more hurdles in the way, but right now a lot of people in confusion about next steps and largely looking ahead in terms of what the workforce will look like come next year, especially as these rules take place.
Russian investigators say they believe Ukraine is behind a car bomb attack which killed a Russian general earlier today. It was the third such killing of a senior military officer in a year. Since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 4 years ago, Moscow has blamed Ukraine for several assassinations of military officers. Ukraine has claimed responsibility for some of them, but it has not commented on today's death. France is blaming Russia for a suspected cyber attack. It knocked the country's national postal service and its banking arm offline on Monday, disrupting Christmas package deliveries. Customers were turned away from post offices and blocked from using banking apps. It's the latest in a series of cyber attacks targeting France, including one last week against the Interior Ministry.
U.S. forces now chasing a third sanctioned oil tanker near the coast of Venezuela. U.S. forces seizing a second tanker over the weekend. This is the third, by the way, that the military has pursued in just the last 2 weeks as part of Operation Southern Spear. The Pentagon saying the effort is aimed at protecting the U.S. homeland. Scripps News White House correspondent Jacob Garden-Schwartz is now live at the White House with the very latest. And Jacob, what are we finding out at this hour?
Yeah, good afternoon, Del. Well, all eyes on Venezuela and the Caribbean as it appears further escalation with alleged drug traffickers is taking place there. As you mentioned at the top, a U.S. official telling Scripps News this morning that a third sanctioned oil tanker is in active pursuit. That official telling us that, quote, officials are pursuing a sanctioned dark fleet vessel that is part of Venezuela's illegal sanctions evasion. It is flying a false flag and under a judicial seizure order. Now, we understand, according to open source intelligence, that tanker is known as the Bella 1. That ship had faced sanctions from the Treasury Department in 2024 for allegedly transporting cargo that had enriched terrorist groups like Hezbollah and one tied to the IRGC. And of course, as you noted, this is the third tanker just over the weekend, officials announcing that they had seized a second tanker. This one had not actually faced direct sanctions, but officials had claimed that it was transporting oil that had been subject to U.S. import restrictions. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem had said in a statement that the United States will, quote, continue to pursue the illicit movement of sanctioned oil that is used to fund more narco-terrorism in the region. We will find you and we will stop you. All of this, of course, adding to growing concerns about a military escalation with Venezuela as we are watching the president's schedule this afternoon, where he is set to deliver what's being described only as a, quote, announcement with other senior military leaders. Of course, in recent days, Trump administration officials have defended these attacks on alleged narcotic boats, these seizing of oil tankers as trying to, not going so far as to suggest that they're trying to pursue regime change in the region, though certainly walking right up to that line. I was there for a press conference last week with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where he took some questions on this. Here's what he had to say. Listen.
At the end of the day, it is clear that the current status quo with the Venezuelan regime is intolerable for the United States. The status quo, that they operate and cooperate with terrorist organizations against the national interests of the United States. Not just cooperate, but partner with and participate in activities that threaten the national interests of the United States. So yes, our goal is to change that dynamic. And that's why the president's doing what he's doing.
Officials pursuing a change in dynamic, of course, very much remains to be seen exactly how that will be accomplished. Meanwhile, we are hearing from Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, or at least, person performing the duties of president. International observers, the United States, very much calling into question the legitimacy of his election. Him posting a statement to his supporters on Telegram over the weekend, writing, quote, that his nation has spent 25 weeks denouncing, confronting, and defeating a campaign of aggression ranging from psychological terrorism to pirates who have attacked oil tankers. We are ready to accelerate the pace of profound revolution. Some quite escalatory comments there. Again, all eyes on this announcement later this afternoon to see what steps, if any, the U.S. might take.
Just moments ago, federal judge hearing arguments on whether to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to immigration detention. It was just last week that he was freed. Abrego Garcia mistakenly deported to El Salvador in March, even though he had been granted asylum from that country. Then the U.S. government brought him back, but says he can't stay here. Officials have now threatened to send him to Uganda, Ghana, and Liberia, all in Africa, but they refuse to send him to Costa Rica, where he has agreed to go.
You're watching Today As It Happened. We'll be back shortly. Thanks for joining us again on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer with your daily look at the day's biggest stories.
More and more people are coming forward claiming they were abused by Jeffrey Epstein, many of them expressing concerns and in some cases outrage surrounding the rollout of those records from the Justice Department. It comes as questions are being raised about files that were released and then taken back. Scripps News senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha joins us live from Denver. And Lori Jane, you've been following this story since we were on the air together on Friday. What are the victims saying?
Hey, Del. Well, as you know, we've been receiving thousands of documents and records. That includes audio clips, photographs, and decades-old reports to police agencies related to the investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. These have been released by the Department of Justice, and this release started on Friday with still tens of thousands of documents to be released. And as we've described, there are many things that have been provided with no context and a slew of reports and records with important names and words redacted. So now a group of women who said they were victimized by Jeffrey Epstein has issued a statement about this, expressing frustration. They said what we received was riddled with abnormal and extreme redactions with no explanation. At the same time, numerous victim identities were left unredacted, causing real and immediate harm. Now, the statement went on to say that there has been no guidance for survivors on how to locate materials pertaining to our own cases, nor have we been provided with copies of our own files despite repeated requests. There have been many questions swirling about whether some names and faces, particularly of men who may have had knowledge of Epstein's actions, will ever be revealed or if they've been intentionally concealed. So the Department of Justice issued a statement saying that they are committed to transparency and redacting only what is legally required. The department is required by law to redact identifying information about the victims, minors, or potential victims, as well as privileged material. No redactions have been or will be made to protect famous individuals or politically exposed persons. However, there were questions about one particular photo that appeared in the initial release to the public, but then disappeared, then reappeared. The photo shows a desk that has photo frames in it and on it, including pictures of Donald Trump. Now, the DOJ said this was pulled and then replaced online, quote, out of an abundance of caution. They did a review, and then they said after the review, it was determined there is no evidence that any Epstein victims are depicted in the photograph, and it has been reposted without any alteration or redaction. And Del, I can tell you the DOJ says there are still thousands of files that are still to come. Del?
Some being dumped even as we speak. Scripps News senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha for us live in Denver. Lori Jane, thank you very much. Meanwhile, there's bipartisan outrage on Capitol Hill. Two congressional members say that they will recommend Attorney General Pam Bondi be held in contempt of Congress for failing to meet that deadline to release all of the Epstein files. FBI Director Kash Patel also under fire, even as we speak. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed joins us live now. And Nate, you've been following all of this, both stories. What's been the reaction so far?
It's interesting, Del. I mean, we had a good feeling going into the end of last week that there was a chance that not everything that members of Congress would want released would be released. And I had an opportunity to ask the two lead sponsors of this legislation what they would be looking for to know that the files were released. The answer from Congressman Thomas Massie was new information about new accusers that haven't previously been mentioned. Ultimately, the files we saw on Friday really did not get into a whole ton of that. Both members outlining what steps they were planning on taking last week before we ever got into this space of talking about whether or not the DOJ actually released everything that it had on the subject. Take a listen. If we do get past that Friday deadline, what are those avenues for you to try and compel the administration to release something?
Well, there are a range of avenues. I mean, we can hold Pam Bondi in inherent contempt that through a resolution in the House that's for violating a statute. We can force prosecution on obstruction of justice.
This is not a congressional subpoena that expires at the end of this Congress. This is a law that lasts forever. So the next Attorney General can prosecute this Attorney General or this FBI director if they do become involved in a cover-up by not being in compliance with this law.
And look, bills to those effects have already been introduced or are soon to be introduced in Congress to try and again hold Pam Bondi accountable for the fact that many of these files have not yet been released. Now, what's interesting is actually we got a little bit more information just earlier this afternoon from Congressman Khanna. He posted the following on X. I want to read it for you. He said, quote, "We hear there will be another DOJ release this afternoon. Here's what Rep. Thomas Massey, survivors, and I want. 1, the witness interviews which name other men. I just spoke about that a second ago. 2, the Epstein emails seized from his computer. 3, the 60-count draft indictment. And 4, the 82-page prosecution memo." He goes on to say that he wants everyone to obviously, to come clean. He wants the DOJ to release all of the details that they possibly can. But what's clear here is there's a whole lot of members of Congress, mostly Democrats, but some Republicans, including Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who say that they do not believe the DOJ is fully being forthcoming with the release of these files.
Yeah, one person that has been featured prominently so far is former President Bill Clinton. Even though the documents are supposed to be heavily redacted, and even though he was supposed to be under investigation as ordered by Donald Trump, what is the Clinton camp saying?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we saw the White House putting out a whole lot of photos on X, on the rapid response and official White House pages, and a lot of White House spokespeople highlighting the fact that Bill Clinton was so heavily featured in these documents. And look, his links with Jeffrey Epstein, those aren't necessarily anything new. We knew that the two were linked. We knew that there were allegations that he'd either traveled on the plane or been to the island. So the photo is not altogether too surprising. Some of the photos we'd seen in the past, some of them with blacked out potentially victims, certainly concerning. But Clinton's camp firing back this afternoon, putting a statement up on X just in the last hour, saying the following, quote, in part, "What the Department of Justice has released so far and the manner in which it did so makes one thing clear. Someone or something is being protected. We do not know whom, what, or why, but we do know this. We need no such protection." And he goes on to make an incredibly fiery statement here. Quote, "Accordingly, we call on President Trump to direct Attorney General Bondi to immediately release any remaining materials referring to, mentioning, or containing a photograph of Bill Clinton." That from a spokesperson for former President Bill Clinton. So Bill Clinton saying, come at me, bring all you've got. Certainly, a tense standoff for the Trump administration. Could more damaging information come out about Mr. Clinton? That's a very real possibility. But at the same time, what's clear here is even the former president believes there's a cover-up underfoot at the Department of Justice.
Yeah, it's fascinating because the survivors who don't want to be called victims say that's what they want with regards to all of the files, with everyone, not just Bill Clinton, but also Donald Trump and the others that have appeared so far.
But one of the things that's most notable is when you look at these files, and from my conversation with Congressman Massey this past Thursday before Congress left on this holiday recess when they don't return until early 2026, the answer from him was, we will know we have new files if there are new names, if there are new accusers, if there are names of people that we previously are not aware of. And in fact, I had an opportunity a couple months ago to ask an attorney for some of the survivors, are there names of current or former government officials that we don't yet know of in these files? That was a question he just told me he could not answer. Again, we're hoping that if they release more information, we could potentially get an answer to some of those, long unanswered questions.
I want to see if any of the men named in these files who witnessed or knew of this statutory rape, because that's what it was, reported it to authorities. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed. Nate, as always, thank you.
We'll have more of today's news coming up on Today As It Happened. You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News recap of the day's biggest events. So let's dive right in.
George Conway is running for Congress in New York. The prominent lawyer and longtime Trump critic is also the former husband of Kellyanne Conway. She managed Trump's first presidential campaign. George Conway then became an outspoken Trump critic. He joins a crowded Democratic primary for New York's 12th Congressional District. The contenders include Jack Schlossberg, JFK's grandson, and at least 8 other Democrats. Beef prices just keep going up. Doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon, despite the Trump administration's efforts to rein in the cost. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reporting ground beef cost about $6.78 a pound in November. That is a 2.1% increase from September, 15% up from this time last year. The record beef price is coming as the U.S. has an historically small cattle herd. A small Nebraska town facing economic Armageddon, its largest employer preparing to shut down. Tyson's Foods will close its Lexington beef plant on January 20th, laying off thousands of workers in the process. That's more than a third of the town's population.
The Tyson plant gave us notice of a layoff procedure warn notice over a week ago. They'll be closing their facility as of January 20th, impacting 3,200 individuals for the community of Lexington.
I have 4 kids. My oldest is 21. I have one that is 13. I have one that is 11, and I have one that is 8. So when I told them, their reaction was to cry. They were mad. And I'm guessing that was just a reaction because they were heartbroken.
That plant has operated for 3 decades, attracting thousands of immigrant workers who built lives across that town. A record 122 million Americans expected to travel for the winter holidays. That's up 2% from last year. 9 in 10 of you will drive. 109 million people hitting the roads. Air travel will also set a record with more than 8 million domestic flights booked already.
You want to just be flexible and understand that we are expecting record travelers. Airports are going to be packed and roads are going to be packed. But it's not like Thanksgiving where it's sort of all condensed in a short period of time. We're talking about 2 weeks here. So it's going to ebb and flow. Some days are going to be worse or better than others.
Some of this year's top domestic travel destinations include Florida, Southern California, and yes, Hawaii. Attorneys for immigration detainees at Florida's Alligator Alcatraz want a federal judge to visit the remote center. They say their clients can't get proper access to lawyers because of scheduling delays and transfer issues. State attorneys disagree, saying it would pose security risk and disrupt operations. The case is one of 3 federal lawsuits that have since been filed. A transgender National Security Agency employee is suing the Trump administration. It has to do with the president's executive order, which recognizes only 2 sexes. Sarah O'Neill saying the order violates federal civil rights law. She adds that it's led to workplace policies that deny her transgender ID. She says she's now banned from using women's restrooms and identifying with female pronouns at work. O'Neill is seeking to block the court's enforcement order and wants financial damages as well.
Thanks for spending part of your evening with us here at Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a wonderful Monday night.